join. Hopefully you'll find the information useful, or if nothing else, interesting. Do that. So we want to cover cybersecurity and specifically incident management and response. And I'll get into kind of a definition of that a little later, but we'll start off with a quick, here we go, agenda. So first of all, we'll cover this and just give you an idea of what the topics will be, kind of definition of cybersecurity, take a look at the cyber threat landscape, discuss risks and responsibilities associated with business as it pertains to computer networks and cybersecurity, discuss some different types of incidents, and then get into the specifics of what is a incident response plan, if you're not familiar with that term, discuss the incident response life cycle, which is, we'll get into a little deeper, and then that consists of the preparation, detection, analysis, containment, eradication, and recovery, post-incident activities, and then wrap up with some best practices. Again, if anyone has questions, there is a chat window open. Please feel free to throw them in there. We probably, unless there's something specific, I'll probably try to get to those at the end. Hopefully we'll have some time for Q&A. First of all, what is cybersecurity? So typical definition, and I think this is pretty commonly accepted, cybersecurity, practice of deploying people, policies, processes, technologies to protect organizations, their critical systems, and sensitive information from digital attacks. So fairly standard and certainly seems reasonable. However, I tend to like to kind of refine that a little differently to say that it's really the practice from a business perspective of managing risk. We all have risk in business, and for most businesses, security, whether it's cyber or otherwise, is a cost center. So it only makes sense where it's either reducing that risk associated to the business, reducing liability and or risk and or saving money. So that's really the approach I think that we like to look at it from a standpoint of cybersecurity. So let's take a look at the current cybersecurity landscape. So everyone is familiar with the ransomware attacks on, MGM, you've heard of that, Colonial Pipeline, numerous healthcare systems. But today, SMBs are really becoming the target. They tend to have less sophisticated cyber defenses, and just by their very nature, there are far more small to medium businesses than large organizations. So it's not something that's just limited to the big players. In fact, the big organizations typically have greater resources to protect themselves, even though we've seen those attacks in the past, than small to medium businesses, which often have loopholes and gaps in their protection. A few stats just to run down. Ransomware attacks have increased 81% year over year. So this is something that we're seeing just increasingly commonplace in our business and with our clients, and something that unfortunately is probably not going to change anytime soon. Some other stats, 37% of all organizations were hit by some type of ransomware in 2021. That's over a third, almost 40%. Here's a scary stat, 170,000 and change. That's the average ransom. So the cost, and that's even to small business, is very, very significant when you have a ransom and if you do decide to pay that. And then even the scarier statistic is that only 65% of the data that was encrypted was restored after a ransom was paid. And really the bottom line on this is organizations are being targeted by financially dollar signals motivated crime actors. Again, the threat actors are no longer kids hacking from their bedroom, as a exercise for their skill set. These are organized crime syndicates, often from foreign countries. They are focused on separating the business from their money. That's it. They don't care about your business. They don't care about you, your employees, your customers, or anything else. They are in this as a business to make money. And they are having a reasonable amount of success. So what industries are consistently suffering from these attacks? Finance, a few examples throughout here. Capital One, everybody sure the Capital One card. A couple years ago, they had a hack, released 100 million credit card applications. Huge hack, cost them, a lot of headaches and money to provide notifications protection. Healthcare, one very recent, Ascension Health, that's a large health network across the entire country. They were literally hit last month, May 8th. So they were hit on May 8th. It's taken them 5 weeks to recover to the point where their doctors and nurses have access universally to electronic health records again. So very significant attack, and also very significant impact in that if you're in a hospital and the doctor can't pull up your health records and health information, it has life and death implications. Construction, Clorox, they suffered about 356 million in lost sales and had a $25 million recovery cost when they were hit a year or two ago. Legal is clearly another area. There's an area where they're exposed to risks of leaks of their client information. A lot of liability there. Public sector, we're seeing that certainly locally. We've had the both just in our upstate New York area, the city of Albany, town of Colony, Albany Airport, have all in the last couple of years had a ransomware attack and have had mixed results in recovery. And then education, New York City schools, one of the largest school districts in the country, they were hit last year as well, released large amounts of information confidential information about their employees. So again, there's just incessant and constant attacks. Wanted to take you through, if we have time here, a brief case study, just to kind of give you a feel of what a typical environment would be for a ransomware attack. This was an actual incident. Again, names have been changed. Obviously, we're not talking, providing any specifics, but we'll call it Taylor Prosthetic, the healthcare, company providing prosthetics. 150 employees. Monday morning after staff meeting, so the sales manager walking the hallway, talks to an employee, says, "Hey, I clicked on a link from an email, thinking it was from somebody, one of our clients, and nothing happened. Seems suspicious." 9:47, office manager notices, "Hey, I can't get to financial files. Can't open my accounting program. Can't process client payments, access medical records." Sales manager says, "Hey, why can't we process orders?" Well, turns out the IT manager finds out, "Hey, our servers have been encrypted and we've been a victim of ransomware." Later that afternoon, business is grinding to a halt. I mean, imagine if you're a business where your staff no longer has access to any client records, any financial records, can't process orders, can't place orders, can't do pretty much anything involved with their computers or their network. What do they do? You can think you could return to paper, but when all of your information is stored on your computer network, that's probably not reasonable. So they get a ransomware request, 1.3 million Bitcoin, and you got to pay that in a week or less, or else, hey, we'll just publish it, all the information, which, by the way, because they're a healthcare company, includes protected health information, which is typical. They're looking for various ways to monetize this incident. One is the ransomware. Two is selling the information on the dark web, which is another form of the web that's available to predominantly criminals. And so they can make money in multiple different ways. So finally, later that night, after a stressful day, the management team's still reviewing this. Customers are asking what's going on. Of course, they have no answers. Insurance company, fortunately, they did have coverage and insurance to help them with this, and that's an incredibly important aspect of having some type of cyber insurance. And they're going to broker the payment to the threat actors and hopefully be able to get restoration. Tuesday, still down. Clients calling, ringing off the hook, can't process any orders, can't ship any orders, paid the ransom, but guess what? We're dealing with criminals. They are not trustworthy. They will lie to you every day, and they say, "Great, thanks for the money. We want more." And that's the reality. You're dealing again with criminals. So if you think that it's a legal or a valid transaction, it's not. So they ask for more money. Insurance company decides to pay. Wednesday, get decryption keys. Okay, so it did work. I mean, and again, often paying ransomware, I will say, does work to some extent. Again, you're dealing with criminals, so you can't trust anything they tell you. However, now, even though you got the decryption keys, it's a huge effort to restore those systems. It's not insignificant. Now the hard work really begins, and it can take, and I mentioned the Ascension Health, when they were hit, 5 weeks to restore their electronic medical health records across multiple hospitals. So it's not an insignificant effort if indeed you are hit by a ransomware or other security incident. So I want to talk a little bit about risks associated and responsibilities, and this has to do with understanding data within an organization. Data is the new gold within an organization. It's where all your customer information is stored. It's all your financial information. So first of all, who owns the data? So there's a data owner, whether that's the owner of the company, whether that's the finance department, whether that's the sales department, whoever. They own the data. They own the liability associated with that information and the budget for protecting it, which could be financial information, protected healthcare information. Talk a little about a couple of different areas where that's important, or that there are regulatory risks associated with that. Could be customer lists, credit card, PCI information, and banking information, also very secure. And then you have your information security team. Those are the guys who look at that and say, what's the risk associated with that data, and what type of mitigation can we implement for the data owner? And that also might include your insurance carrier. Insurance carriers, certainly when you get into having cyber coverage, have requirements as far as how you have to protect that data. And then your IT consultant, if you have one, would be another source to help you protect that data. And then finally, your information technology team is the guys who actually implement the solutions and store the data. So as an analogy, let's look at your house as an analogy for your computer system, your network, and your office. So what's the right cybersecurity, or security, if you will, for your house? Well, first of all, you'd want to identify, what am I protecting? In your house, it might be family, pets, collectibles, documents, so forth. Okay, how do you protect that? Do you lock the windows and doors? Do you put them in a safe? Do you have security lights, yard signs? If you do have an incident, someone tries to break in, do you have an alarm system, motion sensors, doorbell cameras? They see those everywhere, or part of a neighborhood watch. And then how do you respond to that? Do you have a dog? Maybe chase them off? Do you flee the house, call the police, or take action on your own? So similarly, in a cyber environment, what are the pieces you need to have in place? A cyber incident response plan, business continuity disaster recovery plan, insurance coverage, touched on that, possibly even emergency equipment to back up and restore services more quickly. So we'll get into kind of what is an incident response plan, and some of the pieces of that. So an incident response plan is a written document. It's important that it's written, not just something off the top of our head. It's reviewed and formally approved by your leadership team, your management team. So its goal is to help you before, during, and after a confirmed or suspected even security incident. It should clarify who's in charge, who has what role and responsibility should an incident occur. It provides key guidance on response activities. So those activities might be, how do I isolate the network to prevent further access or damage? Should I be informing my bank or other financial institutions that I've been compromised and data associated with that, my transactions or my account information might have been released to criminals? And then also, do you determine, do I have any legally required notifications? We talked about PCI, protected health information, or credit card information. There are specific notification requirements associated with notifying potential clients that information might have been released. You've all probably gotten some of those from Target. They were hacked a number of years ago, or some other consumer organizations where they let you know, hey, we've been hacked, and we'll give you free credit monitoring. They're not necessarily doing that out of the kindness of their heart, although I'd like to think that they're being responsible, but they are required by the government to provide that notification. And if you don't, there are very significant fines associated with non-notification. And then finally, you want to make sure you have a list of key people you might need during a crisis. So your insurance agent, IT consultants, legal, to discuss some of those liability issues. So what's an incident response lifecycle? So the National Institute of Standards and Technologies, and there's a lot of, and I'll give you some references to these later on. There's a lot of information available free on the web that would help organizations understand how to protect themselves and the different pieces. So there's 4 phases of the incident response lifecycle that have been defined by the National Institute of Standards and Technology. So we'll run through those. There's preparation. So this is really the goal of making sure your organization is prepared for a cyber attack. In other words, you don't want to wait until after you have had an incident, whether that's ransomware or some other breach, to figure out, how do I deal with this. That's the wrong time. You're going to be stressed. You're going to be heads down. You're going to be trying to recover and keep the business afloat. That is the wrong time to figure out who should I contact? How should I deal with this? What action should I take? So that's got to be handled well in advance in this preparation stage. You want to make sure you have a specific incident response team. So what is that? Those could be just certain individuals within your organization. If you have an IT manager or someone in charge of your IT network, certainly they would be a component of it. Your financial person, whoever is dealing with your CFO, your controller, somebody there, because one of the things that we see routinely with threat actors is even in a ransomware event, that's, as I said, that's one way to monetize that incident, is to request a ransom. Second is to publish and sell that information on the dark web. So that's another way they can make money. Third is if you're storing your financial information or any type of financial information on your network that they can exfiltrate and now they have access to, they can use that to nefariously either do wire transfers out of your bank account, to access money that way if possible. They can use your customer list and other information to send invalid and fraudulent invoices to your customers with a rerouting their payments to a different bank account that is not yours. So now your customer receives an invoice that looks perfectly valid. It looks exactly like any other invoice they might have received from your organization. And the reality of it is, a lot of times, people are busy and they pay those invoices if it seems routine. And the fact that it's a different bank account, people change banks all the time. They don't think about it until you find out that that payment has gone to a criminal. And when the customer finally calls and says, hey, I just paid this bill and I can't see what it's for. Well, you just paid the criminal. And now the organization who's been attacked and released information has to explain why that customer has paid a fraudulent bill, and it's not a comfortable conversation. You want to make sure you're deploying the appropriate technologies. So there's a lot of and I'm not going to get into all the different pieces and technologies that are available because there's many, but there's a variety of technologies, resources that can prevent security problems from occurring in the first place. None of them are foolproof. There's always exposures and holes, but there are best technologies that you can deploy and keep up to date as you move forward. Other aspects are advocate for good cybersecurity procedures and behaviors. And this really relates to your employees for the most part. In the earlier example, it talked about an employee who clicked on an email that looked perfectly valid, but turned out it was malicious. So how do you train and prepare your employees to determine the difference between a valid email or a valid contact and one that's potentially going to cause a cyber incident? If you are hit by a cyber attack or some type of incident, first of all, how do you know? That's part of the challenge. Many of the incidents I mentioned earlier, like the MGM hack and others, the incident occurred weeks or months before anything was noticed by the staff. Often the threat actors will gain access to your network. They'll have the ability to poke around, if you will, look for valuable information, extract that information, and they all try to do that without being detected. So the key thing is you want to detect if there is suspicious activity, even if nothing is going wrong. You want to know that so that you can halt it as soon as possible and obviously interrupt their process of potentially instituting a ransom attack. So there's intrusion detection and prevention systems that you can utilize that will detect that type of activity. Again, repeat this multiple times, it's critical that that information and those systems are kept up to date. This is not a one and done. The threat actors are constantly improving their skill sets and constantly updating their tools. So keeping your tools up to date and your systems up to date is equally as critical. And it's, again, as I mentioned, critical to know that you've been compromised. If you have been compromised, how do you analyze that? How do you know what's going on? What's happened? Have they removed data and exfiltrated data that they're going to sell on the dark web? Is it ransomware? Is it something else? So you want to collect and analyze that evidence. That's useful later too, so that you know where and how they were able to gain access, and hopefully you can protect yourself in the future. And then I mentioned here below, just reiterating, part of this is notification of appropriate stakeholders, internal, external. You want to certainly let your employees know what's going on, but also often you need to, whether it's a good idea or due to regulatory requirements, you need to notify external, either customers, clients, or vendors. Finally, get into containment, eradication, recovery. So certainly the first step is you want to contain, limit the impact and the damage associated with that. So some things you do want to do, some things you don't want to do. So you certainly disconnecting your systems from the public internet, so it kind of isolates things, allows you to determine, more in a static environment what's going on. However, do not power off your systems. There's a tendency in some cases people say, well, just shut everything off. First of all, you're going to make it really hard to find out what's going on. Also, in many cases, you're not going to be able to turn them back on. So once you power it off, you may have a dead system at that point. So powering off the system is not the correct approach. Disconnecting them certainly is. And then determining also if this threat or this instance is just limited to your local data network internal to your facility, or because many companies now have data and information hosted in the cloud, has that been affected as well? Next is eradication. How do I remove those threats and potential infections? So there's many software tools that can be used to clean compromised systems and equipment. One thing you do want to try to do with some of these tools is scan for what's called a zero-day threat. So a zero-day threat basically means that's a type of software, malicious software, for which there is no known fix for it. It's something that just arrived just today. So even the best protection systems don't know and are not aware of every single virus and threat that comes at them. And with AI today, they're coming more rapidly. And we can certainly utilize AI type of tools to scan for those. But if you have a zero-day threat, that's even more significant. And then finally, how do I recover? If you can, if it seems reasonable to repair systems, restore systems to their original state, and that's something really that is going to have to be determined by your IT consultant and or your level of comfort with putting the systems back into place. Alternatively, you may want to consider replacing. In some cases, it's just not worth the risk of keeping a system, whether that's a desktop or a server, online, knowing there could still be malicious code in that system that could pop up in the future and cause more damage. And then recovery, that's restoring and validating data. And this is one area where you want to make sure you have a solid plan and a solid backup strategy. Many customers have backup on their systems, but is that to a local drive or a local entity? Is it only to a cloud environment? The generally accepted policy for system backups is something called 3-2-1, which basically means you have 3 copies of your data available to you at all times. So you back it up in 3 places. You store the data on 2 different types of media. It could be on a physical media, that could be a PC, hard drive, flash drive, DVD, whatnot. And then definitely keep 1 copy of that geographically separate. You don't keep it on site. So you kind of try to isolate those different data stores so that you ensure that the data you're restoring has also not been affected. And then finally, you want to make sure that the system integrity is intact. You may want to evaluate the system before you even put it back on the public network to make sure that it's as secure as possible moving forward. And then finally, post-incident activity, these kind of review. I mean, if you have an incident, conduct an incident review. Bring all parties together, internal and external. Review your existing tools and procedures. Find out what were the shortcomings, where were the loopholes. Identify gaps in existing rules and processes to enhance employee training. This really boils down to security awareness training because, as I mentioned earlier, that often is the initiation of an event is an employee, not maliciously, but inadvertently clicking on a link, opening a file, causing the incident to occur, and then ultimately update your incident response plan to provide a better response to that type of incident or an incident potentially in the future, because you can put as much protection in place, you're still open to those types of incidents happening in the future. So let's just run down. I know we're kind of getting to the end of the half hour here. Couple of best practices. Develop an incident response plan. Now that's something I mentioned earlier. You don't wait until you're responding to an incident. This really needs to be in place before the incident. You're going to be way too busy and stressed out to try to deal with it then. Review and update annually. If this is something you're not familiar with, certainly we can help you with that. And I can, anyone who's on the call today, if you want to email Darcy and let her know that you're interested in something like this, we can certainly provide a format for you. Conduct regular cyber awareness training and simulations. Again, the landscape is continuously changing. There's new cyber attacks and new methods being used every day, every week, every month. And the only way you help protect against that is by keeping you and your staff aware of what those new threats look like. So cyber awareness training is a critical aspect. And then simulations, whether it's phishing simulations or tabletop exercises, also are critical to maintaining good cyber. Invest in appropriate tools. Again, I don't want to get into all the different tools. There's many available, but you want to ensure that you're utilizing some of the best tools available. And then the other piece of that is auditing for compliance. What we've seen with many clients is they'll implement a variety of tools, but some of these can be cumbersome for their employees to use. So in some cases, we've seen where the employee or somehow they created a workaround, like multi-factor authentication. That's where you've got to enter your password, but then you have to use another tool, whether it's your cell phone or a security token. So it's an extra effort. If you bypass that, or if the employee bypasses that, you're leaving yourself open to additional risk associated with that. And then finally, you can collaborate with a variety of external experts and agencies, and these are a few that are available. The Cyber Security Infrastructure Security Agency, that's a federal agency, part of Homeland Security. It's available. There's a number of resources available on the web for businesses throughout the country to help them harden their defenses and provide a higher level of security. I mentioned the National Institutes of Standards and Technology. They have a Computer Security Response Center. Again, other good resources going into what we reviewed today as far as the life cycle of incident response. So you can access that information there. And should you have an incident, you can contact the FBI Internet Crime Complaint Center, referred to as IC3, and involve the FBI if necessary. And they have great experience here. That's not to say that they're going to have a quick fix or solution, but they can be a resource should you be the subject of a security exposure. So those are some of the resources available. Certainly, you can reach out to Darcy or ourselves, and happy to provide you with some information directly that might be helpful, or even consult to help you develop this incident response plan that we've discussed today. So I'll open it up to questions. I see Darcy's put a couple of links in the chat that you can utilize for both dark web scans. So I mentioned the dark web. That's a section of the internet that's not typically visible. If you're using Edge or Chrome or Firefox, you don't see the dark web. It's a portion of the web that you have to use what's called like a Tor browser, special browsers to be able to dive kind of under the covers, but that's where the criminals live. And you can scan to see if you have any exposures on the dark web using the link that Darcy put in the chat. And then we also offer a free cybersecurity risk assessment if that's something you're interested as well, that we can evaluate your level of risk to see if there's potential improvements that we could recommend that you could implement. So we're at and just past the half hour. I'll open it up to any questions or comments. I don't see any questions in the chat window, so if there are none, hopefully that was useful and you found the information of value. Again, if there is any information, I put my contact information here on the screen. Feel free to reach out with any questions or further requests for information that you feel might be helpful to your business. So, Darcy?
Thank you, everyone, for attending. Have a terrific day, and yeah, be proactive. That's the best thing you can do when it comes to cybersecurity. Don't wait for something to happen.
Exactly. Thank you, Darcy.